housekeeping before Laura does introductions. And yeah, as you can hopefully see, that a meeting is being recorded. I'm sure there's quite a number of people who are not necessarily able to join at this time slot today, so we can share the recording with them, and anybody wants to watch it back there, we can feel free, obviously. Let me just share some very brief slides just to get us started. Okay, here we go. So welcome to our webinar today. I imagine everyone's pretty familiar with Zoom by now, but just in case you're not, you should be able to see and hear all of your panel, including Mark, who's our speaker, myself, Bryony, I'm working marketing at Open University Press, and my colleagues Eleanor and Laura from our editorial team, we're all here today. So yeah, if you've got anything running that plays video, then I would suggest you close that down so you can get the best experience from the webinar. You won't be able to see other attendees today, at the moment at least, but you will be able to engage with everybody who's here today using the chat box and also using the Q&A box. So if you've got any questions that you'd like to put to Mark that crop up during the next half an hour or so of the presentation, then please do pop those in the Q&A box. And as I mentioned, it's being recorded and we'll be sharing that after the event with everybody who is registered. Okay, yeah, sorry, I think I've already covered that. You should have the facility to upvote questions, hopefully, in the Q&A box as well. So if you see anything anyone else has said that you think looks particularly juicy and you'd like to know the answer, then do flag that. And do please share your thoughts and comments as we're going through and engage as much as you can with us. I will let my colleague Laura now introduce our speaker.
Excellent, thanks Bryony. And hi, I'm Laura Pacey, I'm head of Open University Press, and it's my great pleasure to introduce today's event with Mark Walsh. I first met Mark at the 2019 UK ICF conference where he was speaking. I was immediately intrigued with the idea of embodiment and how it related to coaching. I soon learned that Mark was planning the largest conference to have ever been hosted, with over 1,000 embodiment experts speaking and 500,000 delegates for 2020. But not content with just preparing for that, as well as running his Embodied Facilitator course, his Embodiment podcasts, and basking in the glory of his previously published book, Embodiment, Moving Beyond Mindfulness. We then spoke again last April about a book aimed at coaches wanting to work more through the body with their clients and with themselves. It all sounded great, except for the fact that Mark was suggesting he could deliver it in 2 months, write and deliver this book in only 8 weeks. To say that I was skeptical was an understatement, but at that point I wasn't familiar with his relentless work ethic. He did it, and in January we were thrilled to publish The Body in Coaching and Training, an introduction to embodied facilitation. As someone who has previously tried and failed to get on with practices like yoga, it's been so interesting to be challenged by the exercises in the book, which have forced me to reflect on the way that I see my body and mind and realize that I'm much more than just a brain inside a vehicle. Embodiment is part of everything, part of how I conduct myself in meetings, how I breathe, how I might knock on a door. And with these skills, you can instantly learn more about your clients before they even speak. But on that note, before I reveal any more insights, I'm going to pass over to the actual expert to tell you more. So over to Mark Walsh.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you for everyone there for looking after me through the publishing process. It's a really nice book. I was just saying my wife actually quite liked it, and she's normally hypercritical. She said it is quite nice in her Ukrainian accent, so it is very well put together. And it's super, sort of, it's basically all I had to do was write down all the stuff I've been working with for the last 15 years. So it wasn't like I thought it up in a month. It was more just that I sat down and went, right, I'm locked in my house. I might as well make good use of it. And if I promise Laura something, I better bloody do it. So I just got on with it and wrote down all the things I've been teaching trainers and coaches for years. I really would love to find out more about who's here. What would be great is if some people would stick their hand up virtually and then we can bring them on. So that way I feel like I'm teaching human beings and not sort of broadcasting to the virtual abyss. And, you know, from an embodiment point of view, which I'll define in a bit, that's really, really helpful that I can get that kind of feedback and see people listening and how they're responding. And if you're not laughing at my jokes and stuff like that. So it would really, really help me if a few people were to stick their hands up and we could sort of have a few people here as kind of like, you know, to help me teach that way. The other thing that would super help me is if you could say in the chat, where are you in the world and what do you do for a living? So am I mostly talking to HR managers, coaches, training managers, facilitators? Hey, Miriam, thank you for coming up. And, it'd be nice to get a sense of who I'm talking to. Also, the cultural stuff's really fascinating to me. So if you want to put your location, I can see someone from Vienna, someone from Scotland, someone from Copenhagen. That would be really cool, just to get a sense of who's here. Great. Any more? Put your hands up. Are we willing to be seen? I know you may feel a bit zoomed out, so it is doing me a favor, and it's only for half an hour. So if you're willing to do what Miriam's done, I appreciate it. Cool. Welcome. Okay, so why don't we do what I do at the beginning of coaching sessions? This is your first quick win takeaway. Is often people come to coaching and they're like me, they're a bit rushed, and I've spent the day on the computer and I'm all over the place. And I say, hey, what do you want to get from the session? And they say, oh, blah, 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 oh, nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. And then I say, okay, put your feet on the ground. So do this along with me if you feel like it. And notice what part of you is touching the ground or the chair. And take a breath. Yeah. And maybe relax your belly a little bit. Relax your jaw. Say, ah. And then ask yourself, what do you want to get out of this? You're going to be using up 30 minutes of your life that bring you closer to your death that you won't get back. So let's use it wisely. What do you want to get from this session? You've chosen, hey, Clara, you've chosen to invest your time here with me and Laura and the team. So what do you want to get from it? You want to type that in the chat, then I can kind of, I'm like a bad wedding DJ. I will actually respond to your requests. So feel free. Yeah. So that's one of the first things I use for training and coaching, is I'll say to an individual or a group, what do you want to get? And normally people speak from their heads, and they just habitually go, blah. Yeah, particularly if they're busy and stressed, which is me this morning and most of you guys. Yeah, I'm not, doing yoga in the Himalayas today. I'm at a computer working on marketing. And they tend to sort of basically speak a lot of nonsense unless you slow them down a little bit. So we can reduce some of that habitual fight or flight, some of that fight-flight response, which many of us are in, particularly under current conditions where we're not being what's called co-regulated as much as normal. And you just get a better response. Yeah, so this is an example of changing state, which many of you may have come across with the body. It's one of the simplest ways to change state. Another one would be to change position. Like if you're watching this sitting down, you're going to have a very different webinar than if you're watching it walking, just listening to it as you walk through the park, or lying on the floor with your legs up against the wall, or in a hammock. I taught in a hammock recently. I was in Mexico and they had hammocks. It's an entirely different experience teaching in a hammock. Why? Think about this. Why might that be? I'm going to read what you want to get out of this in the meantime while you're thinking about that. I'd like to get a sense of how being in my body aware. Great. Yes. Nice challenge that, Karen. How to use embodiment more effectively. Great. Yeah. Great. How to support your clients. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, let me take a step back. So I was brought up to think that what mattered was reading books. There was a lot of books in my household. My parents were teachers, and I was actually sort of a child genius. And I read every book in the sixth form library. It's like high school. Literally every book. I sped read them. And I noticed that at 17, I was kind of depressed, suicidal, drug addicted, had failed in my first intimate relationship, and was really quite miserable. And I thought to myself, hang on a minute, I've read all the books. Why is this not working? What's going wrong? And I guess I had a sort of an insight of what we might call multiple intelligences, or different ways of knowing. There's different types of learning. And learning about something isn't the same as learning to do something or to be something. I think most of you, you could learn about France, but that's not the same as learning French. Okay, if someone said to you, I'm an amazing lover, I've read a lot of books on kissing, you might be skeptical about that, right? Because we understand that a lot of really important knowledge, and I'd include leadership, coaching, facilitation, would in the same category as kissing and speaking French, is more about the practicing and the doing of it. Yeah. Another example, so Wikipedia hasn't solved all the world's problems, right? Like I've got this, I can access a lot of knowledge here, but that doesn't make me wise. I can get a lot of information, but that might not change me as a coach. Like behind this screen is about 100 books, million that I haven't read behind there. Okay. And is shelf help, one of my teachers calls that. Shelf help books. So books that you haven't read don't really help. So this book is full of practices, right? Why did I make it full of practices? Because, well, that's how you learn. That's how you learn a skill. So for me, some of the practices, and they can be very simple, like being able to regulate your state as a coach, being able to help your client regulate their state. Yeah. So helpful to actually have practical things you can do. Why the body? Well, the body's accessible. So if I said, touch your face, you could all do that. But if I said, touch your soul or touch your spirit, or even touch your mind, that might be a little tricky, right? So the body, if I said, right, I'm coaching Miriam and change your soul, what do I do? Like, how do I do that? How is the question of embodiment. Embodiment's about how we are. Each one of those words is profound. I'll break it down in a minute. So it's how we are as people, the manner of our ontology in relationship, how we are we technically in that way. Yeah. So what does that mean practically? It means I can tell a client, hey, stand a bit differently and let's see if the world looks different. Like, who here is a coach and part of your job is helping clients see the world differently, right? Like, we've all got a habitual tendency. We've all got a habit. Like, if I asked you to cross your arms, for example, try that now, cross your arms, all right? And now cross them the other way, right? You've got a habit, or you can do this with fingers, yeah? You've got a habit, and one way will be normal. That will be your habitual embodiment, your unconscious embodiment. But we can also practice different embodiments. So it doesn't really matter with the arms, does it, right? That's not so significant, but am I a coach who can challenge or a coach who can't? There's a body to that, right? Like, are you a nice facilitator? Everyone do their best nice embodiment. Who's nice? Laura pretends to be nice, but she's quite badass underneath it. Yeah. So it's like this niceness, and that's culturally conditioned and gender conditioned. English women, for example, are conditioned more than Russian men to at least pretend to be nice. Yeah. And then it's how much range do we have? So, like, I know for a fact, and Laura, do you mind me using you as an example? Can you? I'm going to say nice things. I think that's consent and not compliance. That's an important embodied thing to know, by the way.
That's not too nice. I'm just okay, sure.
Clients, yeah. I've got a little bit of experience with Laura, and I'm guessing she'd be able to push back if she needed to. So what do I mean? Does she has range? So Laura can be nice, but she can also hold a line. She can also say, no, Mark, this is what we're doing. Yeah, but she can also be really flexible and say, hey, if you don't do that, we could do it this way. And, you know, she's got a range of possibilities as a leader. So she's a leader. Yeah. If all she could do was be a hammer, everything would look like a nail. Yeah. So if her embodiment was just nice or just firm boundaries, it's not so great for her, is it? It's definitely not so great for me and her team. Yeah. So helping people first identify habitual embodiments. It's like the taste of your own mouth. You can't know it. Yeah. As how do your comfortable underpants feel? Yeah. You're like, I haven't worn underpants in months. We're on lockdown. Anyway, so it's like the smell of your own house. You don't notice it till you go on holiday. I was in Mexico and I came back. And I was like, fuck me, Brighton's really damp. Sorry, I swear quite a lot, by the way. It's an Irish thing. I'll try not to, but I grew up that way. Yeah. So it's like, first of all, becoming aware of your habitual embodiments. Can you think of how that might be useful for your clients? Like, I had a client who was like, why are my staff scared of me? What's the problem? They're all intimidated. I try to be nice. I was like, I'm saying nice things. I read the book on nonviolent communication. And it's like his whole embodiment was just really tense and forwards and aggressive, right? So it didn't matter that he said, you know, right, you're doing a great job. Because what people heard was, be afraid, I'm going to kill you. Yeah. Equally, it could be the opposite way around. Someone who's like, I'm really a stand for women in leadership. And, you know, I really believe women can be strong in leadership because I read a lot of books on that. Don't help, does it? Yeah, I coached one executive from a large Swedish furniture manufacturer, no names mentioned. And you might be able to guess. And she just happened to be quite a small person. And on top of that, she was making herself small. Do you want to try that just to keep this experiential? So one of my teachers calls this smallifying, right? So notice if that's familiar. Some people go their whole life smallifying. It doesn't feel small anymore. It just feels like them. It's the taste of their own mouth, right? Now, bigify, right? Now, can you do bigification? I'm making these words up without being arrogant. Do you have a gender association? Do you have a cultural association? Like, Americans take up more space in workshops where compared to, say, most Southeast Asians. Yeah, if you have a workshop of Indian women and American men, just to take a couple of variables, the American men are going to ask a lot more questions. right? They're going to step forward and volunteer more. Now, is that good or bad? Well, just be aware of it. That's the thing I'd say, right? So can I give people poses? And in the book, we give people postures. We give people simple things like breathing exercise. You can practice taking up space just with your breath. Like, how would it be to breathe small? British people are often almost like they have a corset. And if you put your hands here, how is it to breathe where you push your hands out to the side? Now, you can do that in a more moderate way. If you've got a bra on, by the way, yes, I do know it's pushing the straps out to the side. I live in Brighton, we're all sorts here. So if you can breathe to the side, it's different, as opposed to breathing in the belly, which might be more relaxed. Try breathing in the belly. If you don't know how to do that, tense your belly, then let go of that tension as you breathe in. So it's not complicated, it's not yoga, right? Now, if I was working with you face to face, I could touch and do other things, but you don't need to. As opposed to this breath, which is the last one ADHD boys should do. Try that. Breathe in the front of your chest. If you're sleepy after lunch, do 3 of those. If you're prone to anxiety or aggression, maybe not so helpful. So that's just the breath, right? We can work with posture, breathing, movement. And I can do this consciously or unconsciously. So I can walk with a client. I can just start walking quicker. The quick hack you can take away. If you're with a client who's stuck, why are you sitting in a chair? Yeah, get them up moving. Go for a walk with them. Yeah, get them looking at different things, change the natural environment around them. Like if you walk by the sea in Brighton, that's going to change your embodiment. It's very different than being in a stuffy office in town. Yeah, so our embodiment is impacted by where we are, who we're with, right? You're probably right now you're being Walshed. You may be feeling the sticky residue of Walshness on your own embodiment, right? Like just being here, it's like we influence each other. So as a coach, trainer, HR manager, whatever, you're constantly influencing through your own body. It's kind of scary, right? It's like right now you're mostly being influenced by me because I'm the one talking, you're probably paying attention. But if you were stroking a cat while listening to me, you'd get a whole separate influence, right? You get the cat plus the mark, it'd be a weird cocktail. Make sense? Because we're constantly influencing through the body. So again, as facilitators, isn't it nice to know about that? Yes, one of the things I look at the book is like, here are some exercises to become aware of your habitual embodiment. And some of them are really simple, like you try 2 different things and you say which is familiar. Feedback obviously is another one. Yeah, but there's lots of exercises where you can learn to do this. And then if you find out how you are, you can change it. Rocket science. Okay, so the 4 chapters of the book, there's a kitty. There are 4 chapters of the book, the main 4 chapters. We do a bit on science and embodiment, and stuff on trauma all the way through. But the sort of core of the book is self-awareness, self-regulation, awareness of others, and leadership for others. You can't exactly regulate others, right? You can lead them or influence them. And then each chapter, it's how to do that for yourself and how to do that with a client. Okay, so how do you build self-awareness as a coach? And then it's a very nice logical structure, actually. You know, I just had to fill in the blanks. That's why I was able to do it in a month, Laura. I just like fill in the blanks, basically. Yeah. So we've got the awareness of yourself as a coach, and then how do I build awareness in the client in ways that are respectful, safe, culturally appropriate. I'm quite obsessed with culture, by the way, because I've worked in about 30 countries and my colleagues are from Russia and all sorts of other places. So it's a big factor here. And then the trauma side of things is worth knowing about. We won't get into that today, but there's a bit in every chapter on that. Cool. You still breathing? How you doing? How's this landing? An embodiment point of view, do you feel more excited? If you don't feel more excited, if you don't feel turned on by it, then go away and do something useful with your life, right? Like, is this lighting you up? Is this sort of something that could be positive? Eleanor's changed, I can see as a trainer. She would gone from like, I'm at work, it's kind of boring, to like going, oh, actually, it's quite interesting. Oh, you know, like as a trainer, I'm looking at her and going, great, I'm doing a good job, at least for her. I think Miriam was into it already. And, you know, we're looking at it. Clara's got the nice head tilt, by the way. That's the head. The nice people have the head tilt. Yeah. Russian women don't do that. Russian, straight. You know, everyone want to try. It's the Princess Diana, the nice head tilt. I could probably do it a bit more of that, Clara. So you can coach me on that. I don't know Clara, though, of course. So it could just be this situation. You know, she's on Zoom and it's a bit exposing. So I won't bring any more attention to her. Good. What's a good way to get a client comfortable with exploring this? Clara's happy about that. She started breathing again now. What's a good way to get a client comfortable with exploring about this? Well, I guess you've got the same thing about how do you make clients motivated to do anything, right? You relate it to their concerns, you speak their language, and you're respectful in how you present things. So a key part of embodiment is calibration. So it's kind of like, what's too much, right? So if you were like a bunch of my hippie friends in Bali, right, it would be like, right, lesson 1, naked conscious dance, you know? And like, that's not going to be a good idea for the average business crowd, right? With a business crowd, it might be like, let's try walking around the room. That's enough weirdness, yeah? Like when I taught at the ICF where Laura met me, we had no chairs in the presentation and people were like, what the hell? You know, that was just removing the chairs was enough weirdness. Yeah, so this is the principle of calibration. And as a trainer, I hope you're tuned into this, right? So this is an embodiment skill as a trainer, is empathy. So that's a mixture of observation, like I'm looking at bodies, like is the head tilt, where's the breath, how's the posture? But it's also just feeling it, like, I think I pushed this too hard, or yeah, I think Laura's going to be fine with this. There's always a sort of guessing kind of going on with that. It's like you're constantly tasting the audience. Yeah, this is why I didn't want to teach without at least some people on camera, right? It's a little bit tricky when it's one-sided and our brain can put a lot of anxiety in that. It's one of the challenges of Zoom, actually. Yeah, we're still breathing. Notice what posture you're in now. How's your posture? Is it like curious and open, or is it like evaluative or defensive? Even people I can't see, right? You're probably giving me a more honest posture in a way. Is it like, I don't believe this? Yeah, or is it like, oh, teach me everything, a great guru, maybe a bit too open? Yeah, are you standing in your own competence, your own knowledge base, which most of you have, I guess. Yeah. Making sense? Yeah. If it's not making sense, put so in the chat. So what is embodiment? Embodiment is a conscious study of the body. So not the body as a piece of meat or a brain taxi, but the body as part of who we are. And this makes sense. Like, this makes sense to a dog, right? Or a kid. Like my kid can look at someone and go, I don't like him. Yeah, now that might be prejudice because someone with a red jumper once slapped her or something, right? But often she's spot on. I'm going, yes, I could break it down and say the reason you have low trust in that individual is blah, 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 because I've studied it, right? But she'll get it in her body. She also gets my mood. She's like, now is the time to ask Mark for money. Yeah, or no, Mark's not going to play with me. He's stressed out about his new book or something like that, right? Like she feels that. Or like dominance, a dog can feel your dominance, right? We're all in dominance hierarchies, whether you like it or not. Even if you're like super liberal and you vote green and live in Brighton like me, okay, you're in dominance, and that is impacted in the body. Like a dog will feel right away whether you're in charge or he's in charge. All right, dogs actually don't feel comfortable if they're in charge. They're like, what the hell's going on? Yeah. So the same with your coachee. Like, are you projecting a lot of dominance, which might make coaching hard but teaching easier? Or not, or actually not enough? Have you lost authority, right? So if we look at kind of, these are embodied, this is what we could call embodied leadership as this trend, yeah? Cool, so the book sort of, I'm kind of really just jumping around today in a fun, playful way, because that's how I like to teach. The book's way more structured, okay? So if you're the sort of person who likes structure and organization, then don't worry, the book's got it, all right? But when I teach, it tends to be anarchic. That also depends on your embodiment, right? Are you someone who likes structure? Do you have that? Yes, I do. Yeah, or are you someone who's like, whatever, just play, free and easy, But that's a different kind of coaching client, isn't it? If I sit down with the first client and just go, right, day one, okay, here's what we're going to do. Oh, I don't even know what we're going to do. They're going to just lose trust immediately. Yeah, but for the second coaching client, that kind of fun, lively embodiment can be more interesting, more compelling, less boring, right? Yeah. It's not about acting, it's about range. It's about range. You need to genuinely be able to embody these things, which is why practices come in over time, because state changing is quick. You can do 3 chest breaths or 3 belly breaths, or I can get you standing, shaking and jumping up and down. Yeah, a little shaking is something I do with clients quite often as well, if you want another quick win. Do that really quick. Stand up, have a shake. Right? If your client's stuck, that's a good unsticker. Yeah, quickie, real easy one. You could take that into a whole form of trauma therapy, but just as a quick shake, it's useful. But that's not going to change them as a person. All right? State changing is like getting drunk or taking drugs. It wears off. Yeah, so it's like you're not drunk forever when you get drunk. Yeah, it's the same with state changing. So practices are what builds a different way of being. So embodiment works at the level of being as well as the level of state, both being aware of our state, emotional intelligence, mindfulness, but also being aware of our being, more like personality patterns, and then being able to alter our state. That's more than mindfulness, right? And mindfulness is awareness, embodiment is awareness plus choice. Yeah, there are practices from Buddhism like metta meditation, which do change things, but it's more on the choice front. And then being aware of our traits and being able to influence and develop those traits through practice. So that's what the book is. It's just a chapter on each of those things broken down with lots of practical tips and exercises. It's really interesting to see Laura get into it, because I was like, oh, she's an editor, she's not really into this stuff. She's not an embodiment person or a coach. And then she started asking me questions about it. Like, didn't you, Laura? You're like, said it with me, oh, what's this? And oh, that looks good. So I was like, good. Yeah. Cool. So I'm going to come back to some of your aims earlier. So you might want to take a breath and a stretch. We're almost on Q&A time, actually. Software and hardware. Yeah, so it's important in terms of being in our heads. That's how we're acculturated. That's normal in the modern world. There is a piece of work to be done that you can't get from a book, but you can get the way to do it from a book in terms of coming back to our own bodies, right? And often coaches, they say, listen, I'm fine, but my clients are really screwed up. And I say, okay, let's start with you. So we do an online course, and the first three months of 5 is like self-awareness. Yeah, like that's the beginning for a coach, rather than the tools. The book's full of lots of tools and hacks, but it's a bit deeper than that, really. Yeah, if you're curious about this, I hope this is a sort of intro to it. There's lots, there's other stuff out there on YouTube. We have a podcast on embodiment and loads of free stuff on YouTube. So the book I'd say is really good if you want structure and you want it specific to facilitation. It's it's really the textbook for that. I've been teaching it for years. I really like teaching facilitators because you can come in at quite a high level and they're going to impact a lot of other people. And we just needed a textbook, basically. So that's what I wrote down for Laura. Yeah, and then we could go much deeper into this, like really deep feeling into the body and kind of intuitive sense, dialoguing with the body. Yeah, in terms of using it effectively, be embodied yourself, first tool. Okay, most important thing. Secondly, have some tools that aren't too fluffy, that work, right? Like tried and tested. Third one is use language, which is clear and what's called operational. So that's language of instructions. Let me give you a bad example. If I once saw one of my teachers, who's very Californian, they said to this Scottish coach, they said, extend your energy to the far corners of the universe. And this Scottish coach said, like in a broad Glaswegian accent, which I won't impersonate, she said, how? She's like, what do you mean? So like being able to give clear instructions. And this is what you'll get from the book that's maybe you wouldn't get from the average yoga teacher or something like that. I love yoga and I love meditation, but often there's a sort of baggage that's a little bit sort of Eastern there. And that if you work in a business environment or with skeptical teenagers or cynical NGO workers, which I used to do, then that's really important that you body it, you walk the talk, but B, you're able to put it in language, which is really clear. And I sort of, with my students, we sort of beat that out of them over the time. We call them unicorns, and we call it unicorn killing to get rid of all the sort of fancy words. Yeah, so in terms of why I do this, for me, right now in the world, disembodiment is rampant. People are cut off from each other, and it's in relationship we actually feel, right? A lot of people are sat at home and not moving. You're not in the natural world with the wind on your skin. People are a little bit stressed. People are not got a lot of that, what's called co-regulation, where you move with other people, get together with other people. I think there's a really big need for the embodiment piece, particularly now, and even more so when we come out of this mess. Let's say the summer, fingers crossed. Yeah, there's going to be a whole job to be done from embodiment teachers. And I think the other thing that's much deeper, as well as just being really practical to work with the body, embodiment turns on our humanity. So unless you're in contact with your body, you're a psychopath. Yeah, you've not got empathy. So what is empathy? It's a felt sense of the other in ourselves, right? And there can be this dance between not too much attention on self or other, but this dance between the two. Yeah. And really without that, people do horrible things. People do really horrible things. We're able to hurt ourselves. Like if you have a client do you have clients who are self-abusive? Like they overwork themselves. I mean, I risk this some days and I come back to myself and I go, oh God, wow, maybe I'm just going to go for a walk outside or have a bath or, look after myself. I really feel that brutality. And when I'm going at 1,000 miles an hour and I'm tense, I'm not feeling my brutality. So self-care doesn't even come on the radar. Yeah. And then it's like, am I being sensitive to the other? Like I was a bit sharp with my wife yesterday and I wasn't abusive, really. I didn't beat her with a stick or something, but I just was a bit harsh with her and I felt it and I saw her reaction and I felt it in myself. I went, sorry, I didn't need to do that. Yeah, I said, yes, it is annoying that your shoes are in the way of the door again, but it's not really a big deal. And would you be willing to put them over here? Yeah, and I was able to come back to some kind of relationship with her before I'd completely ruined my night. Yeah, so it's like I caught it quite quick. That was a good day, right? And then this really goes up to abuses, violence, war, the environmental destruction, really, you know, sort of stuff across ethnic groups, you know, it really goes up to some pretty harsh stuff if people lose this contact with themselves. You know, it's effectively, it's our humanity. It's all we're really talking about with embodiment, is being in contact with yourself. Self-connection, connection with other, you need self-connection for other connection, right? So we're just talking about being human. It's kind of weird. I have a job, and maybe in the future, though, you know, in a better world, there would be no such thing as an embodiment teacher. It'd just be obvious. It would just be normal. But for now, it's necessary. And I think having a sort of textbook which gives structure to that is really helpful. So I'm glad this is out there. I am proud of it. It is very nicely put together. So yeah, there's me, and I think that leaves enough time for Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
It does. Thank you, Mark. We've had a few questions so far, but if everyone could put them on the Q&A box, and if people could upvote, so if we can't get around to all the questions, we have the ones which people have the most burning desire to have answered in this slot, then that would be fantastic. I'm just going to capture a few before they get lost from the chat box already. So Sue asked, what's a good way to get clients comfortable with exploring embodiment?
Yeah, and I mentioned that before, but first of all, is be really comfortable in your own body. So think about like when you had like your first kiss when you were like 15 or 16 or whatever, right? Like you were like super uncomfortable, but that made the other person really uncomfortable. And then you're sort of awkward because you're both awkward about it, right? But when you're a few years later, you were comfortable and that made the other person comfortable. So it's the same with embodiment. If you're just at home in your own skin, which is a nice poetic definition of embodiment, by the way, if you're at home in your own skin, other people are. And now I present this like no big deal. I've presented to all sorts of corporate groups and military and police. It's just no big deal to me. So that's the first thing, is being comfortable with yourself, making it super practical. Like, you know, I remember I was teaching the Met, right? All these top police in the Met, really high level police. And I walked in, I was like, right, I just got back from Afghanistan. So, you know, I hope I'm not too stressed. And that, you know, credibility in myself, right? But it's how I stood. I didn't say, okay, I'm going to teach you about embodiment now. I said, hello, my name is Mark. This is what we're going to do today. So my own embodiment. And then I said, who here has some stress in their life and wants a practical tool to reduce that stress? All the hands go up. And then I say, okay, how would it impact you if you had less stress? Oh, my wife relationship would be better. I'd be a better dad. I'd be a better mom. You know, I'd have more sex, whatever, right? And I go, okay, so I'm going to show you something. You don't have to believe a word I say. It's not belief-based, not religion. I say, give me 2 minutes, give it a try. If you don't like it, I'll leave, right? And then we do something really practical, like centering. So someone asked here, Rachel, about one thing to use, centering. Really simple technique, like I did right at the beginning of the workshop. Put your feet on the floor, relax your belly, even take a breath, which they could sort of do wrong, but it's probably going to be better than nothing. Even just bringing a bit of body awareness, relax the jaw, relax the belly, say, these basic tools, right? Posture, relaxation, sound. Okay, how do you feel now? I feel better. Amazing. Yeah, like 9 out of 10 people are going to feel better after 1 minute of centering. And we can test it against things like we could apply it to giving feedback or doing a presentation or some practical skill. So always making it practical and using language they understand. So not talking about chakras and energy and unicorns and dolphins, none of that crap, okay? Just keep it in simple language. Sometimes adding a little bit of neuroscience helps as well. I didn't do that today, but that can be a nice kind of background piece.
Sometimes it's also just not knowing the language. So I've never thought about centering myself, but sometimes in moments of stress, I've, you know, taken in a breath for 5 seconds, held it, and then let it go for another 5. And it's not necessarily being aware that that is embodiment. And that's something that's probably so many of us do. And then it doesn't take too much to start building on that, especially if you buy the book.
Right, you can also do other stuff, but it's I would say it is common sense. Just embodiment teachers refine common sense. So we could tell you like 10 breathing techniques, and this one might be better for you, and this is how to do it. So you don't, like, say some people take a deep breath and they go, And I'm like, okay, that's really not going to help with your stress, right? They've interpreted deep as meaning big and high, which is, so this is where the expertise come in. But a lot of it, as you say, Laura, there's some common sense things. Like my mum used to say, go for a walk and calm down, like you count to 10, there's common sense things there too. But it's also about knowing the range of what's out there, because there's so many embodiment practices, and I've geeked out on all of them. And with the embodiment conference, we had all these teachers. Like, do you know what 5 rhythms is and continuum? Do you know 10 different styles of yoga? Do you know the 10 different styles of Aikido? Like, most people don't, right? So this is where it could be helpful to have a bit of a guide or have a community around it as well. I think that's very helpful, people that go into this in more details. But for the average coach out there, just learning a few of these kind of quick tips in the book will be super useful. And we deliberately put them in a way that's safe, so you sort of can't go wrong with them. And the trauma awareness stuff is in there, and then kind of looking at their own embodiment in a little bit deeper way. And some feel very inspired to take up, yoga or theatre or something to go deeper into it. And no one's an expert in all of embodiment. It's such a big area.
Francesca's asked if there's a best time to practice embodiment, a time of the day, perhaps.
Time when you do it. It's the simple answer. Yeah, by the way, practice is going to be my answer to all of your questions. Yeah, no matter what it is. So a lot of people practice first thing in the morning, just when they're a little bit quieter before their phone gets them. I find bookending my day is very helpful. I have a morning and an evening practice, but it's different things for different people. And, when we do courses, we and the book kind of takes you through it. But when we do like online courses, it's very similar. It's how we got the structure, really. We give people things like they set their iPhone to make an alarm 5 times a day. And every time they do that, they just check in with their body for 10 seconds. So it's like, if I work with business clients who are pretty unaware of themselves, the alarm goes off and they go, well, how am I? Oh, I'm stressed. Oh, I'm angry. Oh, I'm anxious. And they weren't really aware of it, but it was still running the show. So those little interruptions can be quite helpful. And we pepper those through the day. And you can also add practices to things like buying a coffee, right? So you can still buy a coffee in Brighton. You can't sit down, but you can walk around with it. And when you buy the coffee, you just notice how you are and how they are in that exchange. And it's very good because it's a sort of low consequence exchange, right? You don't really want to be practicing this with your kids. You apply it with your kids, right? But you're not going to say to your kids, like, can you be 20% less annoying? And, your marriage, like, got divorced, whereas like just buying a coffee is something really safe, straightforward. You can really spend that some of your attention that you don't need on the interaction. So having practices built into your day, having dedicated practices like taking up yoga, having micro practices like you do a centering every time you wash your hands or go to the toilet. Wash your hands is a good one. Every time you put the gel on, okay, become mindful of your hands, breathe, okay, finish with the gel. It takes about 30 seconds, doesn't it, to evaporate? That could be a really nice little practice, just pepper in your day.
I think also what you mentioned about just having those timers for checking is quite useful for people who are working remotely now and at desks, and maybe they're in a smaller space in the office. I certainly have bad neck problems now from working from home for a year. So it is just noticing at the end of meetings to go up for a quick stretch and a walk in a way that I never had to think about before when I had a commute where I walked out of the house first and around the office to the kitchen. It's a lot further than it is in my place. Trassa has mentioned that she's really feeling being aware of her body right now, and she thought that you couldn't see her, and then she wondered if she could because we have Miriam and Clara who have put themselves forward, but then she realized that actually how she feels in her body is really affected by whether she can be seen or not. Really? Yeah, so her question is how to raise someone's awareness of their physicality without it feeling quite exposing or threatening.
Got it. I'll definitely speak to that. Let me speak to something that's in the background there first, though. It's a really interesting experiment. You're all on Zoom, I imagine, at some point, right? Notice your embodiment, and then turn your camera off and notice what changes. So most people, this is a little Zoom embodiment exercise, right? So yeah, you can try that now if you want, Laura or Miriam, if you want to give that a go. And often people relax or they stop socially presenting. So people have a social presentation self, which is something like be nice, be clever, be sexy, be fun, be the funny one, be the nice one, be the strong one. So it's interesting to see what that social persona, how that is embodied, and you can get rid of it quite quickly just by turning a camera off and on. Another exercise I do is I imagine there was a statue in your hometown 100 meters tall of you, and what pose would you want it to be in? And then which pose would you not want it to be in? Right? Like I might be like, yes, well, as a guy, I want to seem strong and competent. You know, there's my sort of gendered conditioning in there, right? And you might be like, well, actually, I want to be nice, or, you know, I want to be seen as loving. And it's like, well, we all have a loving side, but that ain't all of you, right? So that's a little question, like looking at examining your personas through the sort of social seen and unseen. And we're always embodied in relationship. Like I'm in my sort of teacher embodiment now, right? Like if I was in this exact embodiment with my niece, that would be a bit weird, or my mum. Right, my mum brings out like this weird teenage embodiment regression in me, you know, because it's like most of my Pavlovian association was when I was young with her. So it's a very different embodiment. Place changes it. You know, I was in Mexico, now I'm in Brighton. It's different. You know, the rooms of my house, even the clothes you wear. Some of my students in Russia did a whole thing on embodied clothes. You know, I put a shirt on when I do work, just for you, Laura. I feel like it's smart. Okay, because it brings out a slightly more professional self than when I have a t-shirt on. You know. So there's different ways we can impact it. How to raise someone's awareness without feeling ill. Yeah. So any self-awareness raising, including embodied self-awareness, is threatening because there's always a gap between our self-perception and our what's technically known as bullshit. Yeah. There's always a gap. And that gap, by closing that gap, is a bit awkward. Like I used to, in my head, I sound like a British Harrison Ford. That's what my voice sounds like. Okay. In reality, not so much. So
I wouldn't say you're that far off.
Oh, well, thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. So it's, you know, when I first started looking at my YouTube videos, I was shocked at how I sounded. So feedback's a bitch, right? Like feedback's not that much fun. So like that has to be calibrated as to how resourced they are, number one. And number two, how much trust you have with that person. Number three, their personality type. But so if someone's under-resourced, I'm not going to say, by the way, your problem. There's not even permission there, right? And then the other thing, if they say, listen, I'm really having a good day. I really want to learn about myself. Mark, I've worked with you for a year. Let me have it. Then I'm going to give them all guns. The other thing is if you tell people, they don't really listen. So I might instead show them. I might say, you know, back to that aggressive manager that was literally, well, I'm not exaggerating much, by the way, when I did that earlier. I said, hey, John, I'm changing his name. Hey, John, can I show you how you said that? Is that all right? I'm not mocking you. I'd just like to show that back to you. Yeah, or we get someone to do your walk. That's an exercise we do. It's horrifying. It really is. It's absolutely horrifying. Yeah. And then they're normally like, oh, I quite like being you. This feels really, someone said confident for me or direct. And I was like, God, I look like such a knobhead. You know, so it's like getting that feedback is painful. So we do have to calibrate it. Do you understand by calibration? Like that's like dosage, right? Like you have to calibrate it to how resourced they are, their personality type, and critically the level of trust. And really framing it that like, hey, this isn't, I always say, look, we're all screwed up. It's just in different ways. Okay. You're not special. Yeah. So you like really framing it like it's feedback, it's learning. It's not about, the model we have is awareness, range, and choice. This is the model of the book. So it's not you're broken, let's fix you. Yeah, we're all weird. We're all different. You have some embodiment. Like if you didn't learn to be nice, you'd learn to be clever. If you didn't learn to be clever, you learn to be tough. If you didn't learn to be tough, you learn to be funny. Or there's not actually that many options. It's about 10, right? If you look on the screen, you can we won't type what we guess, but they all freeze now. You can see everyone has a different adaptation because they have different personality. So I just explained like, look, we have to have some adaptation. That's normal. That's your sort of persona or personality if you want to go deeper. And let's build some range, you know, let's get a nice self as well as a clever one, as well as a sexy one, as well as because otherwise it's a tyranny, isn't it? It's like if you have to be one way, like have to be nice or have to be sexy or have to be funny, right? So we build range and that gives more options and more freedom, which sort of isn't threatening to have more options rather than you're broken, let's fix you so you can be as good as me. That's not so nice. So the general frame is awareness, range, and choice. I hope that helps, Trazer or Trazer. I hope I'm saying your name right. But it's quite an art. You know, there is an art to this as well.
And Lisa actually mentioned that on Zoom, hiding the self-view is really great because I think that's something that we haven't had to experience before. The idea of seeing ourselves in a meeting, and it's that idea of listening to your voice back. It's absolutely horrible. So yeah, that's a good point.
If you're looking for authenticity when you're presenting, I would hide self-view. Yeah, because otherwise we're managing an appearance of being authentic. It's really, really hard. I mean, have you ever been in a situation where someone got a camera out and you started posing without meaning to? So it's difficult to be authentic when you're being observed and recorded, basically, right? Yeah. Great questions by those so far. Prescribe, yes, homework is amazing. This is one of the best things about embodiment is we give homework, right? Because you can have the best session in the world, but it's still an hour of their week, right? It's 1 hour of, I don't know, do the maths, how many hours are in a week? What is it, 100 and whatever, yeah? But if you give them a piece of homework, you can drip feed the learning rather than just have the big insight or the big, you know, yay, I did a workshop and it was amazing, but now, you know, it goes away again in a week, doesn't it? Whereas you can drip feed it, which makes it more sticky. Yeah, so I give 1 minute poses, like we have an authority pose and a generosity pose and a no pose for boundaries, a bunch of them in the book. And I give those as 1 minute homeworks. Yeah, or let's say I'm teaching an executive who walks from the subway, the tube to their office every day, right? So we give them that as the walk as the piece of homework. It costs them 0 minutes, right? Like time is the big currency for most of my clients. Yeah, or if they get into it, we can give them some serious homework like learn tango, learn to lead, yeah, or join a karate club, learn discipline. But that's only for the more dedicated people who are willing to invest time. I mean, if you're a coach, you know, I really want to get into embodiment, then do get like a big practice, like 4-6 hours a week. But if most of my clients, they ain't going to do 1 hour a week, let alone, you know, they'll do 2 lots of 1 minute a day, you know, so micro practices like that. Yeah, but homework for sure. And it depends, Donald, it depends what they need, right? So the prescription is going to be different depending on what they need. Yeah, this is not the same for, like, Clara doesn't need the same as Laura, doesn't need the same as Eleanor. They need different things. They could probably tell you what they need, right? Like without too much, they might say, look, my problem is I'm too nice. I have a colleague who does courses for women who are too nice. That's her whole thing. Or my problem is, you know, I tend to be a bit pushy and aggressive and people get scared of me when I'm trying to be nice. So that's going to lead to a very different piece of homework. Yeah. Cool.
Francesca's asked that she's finding it difficult to relax today because she's facing unknown people for work. And some people say that tension is actually a useful tool when used with awareness. So is it good to try centering to calm herself down, or should she be embracing that tension?
Yeah. So no athlete would ever want to be tense, would they? I mean, or think of it another way. Did you ever say to yourself, I wish I was more stressed yesterday? That would have gone a lot better had I been angrier and more scared. Now, there is a certain base level of stimulation that's helpful, right? It's like better, worse. Yeah. So if you're like super sleepy, stoned, don't give a shit, not passionate, disengaged, yes, a certain level of activation we could say is useful. You know, in the body, we don't want to collapse, right? So there's a certain level of tonality to be upright. We could call that tension or tonality. It's the same thing. So there is a certain level of, you know, we don't want to be like Mr. Floppy, like, hi, I'm, you know, your coach today, right? There needs to be a certain level of, I call that extension, no more than tension. Yeah, generally people overestimate how much tension is useful. Generally, relaxation is helpful as long as you're not sacrificing structure or extension. But don't believe me, try it. I mean, do a coaching session collapsed, do a coaching session tensed, and then do a coaching session relaxed and extended. See which one works best. You probably lose the first 2 clients, but that's your bad.
Well, I think it's when they talk about like high stress environments for work, and some people say they thrive on that, but I think what they actually mean is they thrive on high pressure, and you don't have to be stressed just because of the high pressure environment.
No, well, people thrive on high demands if their competency matches it. That's what leads to flow states. Right, so a balance between competency and demand is absolutely essential, or else we're bored. Most people, though, are just addicted to adrenaline who say that, and they don't know any different. Right, they're not the Zen master who's moving quickly, like the martial artist who's able to move quickly under pressure. They're just a head case. They're just an absolutely stressed, adrenaline, cortisol-soaked head case who doesn't know any difference and is addicted to the drug. I mean, adrenaline's an addictive drug. Yeah, it's what, you know, it's how coffee works. So it's not surprised they like it. We like what we're used to. We all like the smell of our own crap. We like what we're used to. We like what's familiar, not what's best. Yeah, we like if they've got a point of comparison. Also, some people make a false comparison. It's like either they're active and tense or they're disengaged and relaxed. So where I would coach here is a fairly sophisticated kind of coaching we call distinction coaching, where we get them to go the bodies of those two things, and then we offer them the third option. How would it be in the body to be engaged, intense, and relaxed? Right? And they go, oh, they don't know at first, and then you coach them through it, and they go, oh, this is way better, right? Because you just got the benefits of A and the benefits of B to get combined, right? They've made a false dichotomy. So that's another thing that's going on. But, you know, we're addicted to speed and adrenaline. I get it. You know, I'm like that myself. I get it. And often an embodiment is about slowing down and resetting the system. Like I did, you know, 15 minutes of meditation this morning, a busy day. Don't have so long, but 15 minutes is enough just for me to kind of come back to myself a little bit before I dive into 4 hours of marketing. So we're almost on time, aren't we?
Yes, I was going to ask, do you notice any common difficulties that coaches encounter when they're trying to build embodiment techniques into their practice?
Say that again, Laura.
Like, are there any common problems that coaches display when they're trying to start using embodiment in their practice with themselves and with clients?
Over or underconfidence. So overconfidence is thinking they know it, and underconfidence is thinking they don't, right? And they're both wrong. So it's, I mean, essentially that's with my students, that's I either have to give them encouragement and confidence, or I have to knock them down a peg or two, right? Because it's quite dangerous if people kind of really go too gung-ho with it. So they're the things, the main ones. The other one, language use, I mentioned, not embodying it themselves, like not having their own practice, making it too complicated. It can be really just about sitting differently, standing differently. It doesn't have to be walking differently. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Making it too esoteric, ignoring consent and calibration. So that's not really trauma sensitive. Not being culturally aware. Like I can't teach in Denmark how I teach in Russia. You know, Russia, I have to command the room. You know, Denmark, it's like, yeah, if you don't mind, let's do it together. It's cool. Actually, I have a Dutch accent for this joke. I don't know why, but it's like, maybe we'll take a break, maybe not. It's all good. Let's discuss it. You know, like I said, the cultural adaptation, I think, is really critical as well. And a lot of American teachers get that wrong because they don't really get culture.
Cool. I also know that you don't want to dive into trauma today because that would be another webinar in itself, but it's very prevalent in the book, and it's something that I think coaches are often wary of because of knowing when to refer on to a counsellor or a psychotherapist. Have you got any tips for recognizing trauma in people through the body and when to refer on?
That's an hour-long webinar.
Yeah.
What you need to do is empathize, stabilize, refer. Right. So this is ESR. So empathy, be a nice human being, right? That's not so hard and helps if you're embodied. Stabilize, centering, help them get their shit together. Refer, if in doubt, refer. If it's a maybe, refer. If you're not sure, refer. Have the number of a male and female therapist on your phone. Yeah. So like that's would be my recommendation to all my clients. In terms of spotting it, what you're looking for is chronic fight or flight. So chronic tension dissociation, for example. Or collapse in some cases. Yeah. So fight, flight, freeze, that's what you're looking for. So getting really familiar with those states through calibrated embodied work means you can spot it a lot more. You know, I've got colleagues I look at and go, okay, you need to go get some EMDR therapy. You know, like you're like that every time I talk to you. Yeah. Or you learn to spot it verbally. Like I've got a friend who's just really defensive, and everything I say, she says the opposite. Well, that kind of defensiveness could be a trauma symptom. There's lots of trauma symptoms, black and white thinking. There's a whole nother webinar, but I mean, the book has a bit at the end of every chapter on how trauma impacts it. So you don't need to be a therapist. It's just about being trauma aware. I think maybe I just want to end by just encouraging people to work with the body, you know, whether you buy the book or not. It's a good textbook, but you know, there's other good schools out there. I'd say don't be afraid of it. If you do your own work, you have your own practice, and you have a few basic ethical rules and, you know, consent and calibration, bring the body in. I mean, just saying to a client like, hey, what do you do in your body when I say that? Well, hey, I noticed you stopped breathing when you started talking, when I mentioned money. How's that working out for you? Right? Like, you don't have to be an embodiment genius to sort of say what you're doing in your body right now. Yeah, it's just like, what happened in your breathing then? It's not you can learn that fairly easily. So I just want to encourage people to bring it in. And, you know, thank you to Open University Press for making a nice book for people that want kind of a nice structure.
I'm going to do the shameless publisher plug and also put the link in in the chat box right now. And actually, yes, Bryony's going to mention there's also a discount code, which I'll also put in the chat box.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark, for today. I think people have probably really enjoyed that. It's been very engaging and lots of interesting takeaways, I think, whatever your role is. So thank you again to everybody who's attended today. We will be sharing the recording of today's session. So do watch it again, share it with your friends and colleagues. And if you do want to get hold of a copy of the book, if you don't already have it, please do take advantage of the discount and the promotion code that we're offering today. So thank you again. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email. So thanks once again, Mark, and thank you, Laura, for posing the questions for us today too.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just putting my Insta and Gram in there if anyone wants to be in touch. And you can find me, the podcast and other things on the internet if people are interested in embodiment generally. But if you can give us, if you've got the book already, has anyone bought the book already? Any chance of an Amazon review? Because we've only got a few, and they're quite hard to get for some reason. And basically, one troll could come along and completely trash my ratings. So hoping you're not here, troll. But if someone bought the book, Amazon review, that'd be so helpful because Amazon like rates it higher and stuff.
Great plug. Thank you.
Everyone, I'm going to go now. Thank you for
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.